like, I can put it through. Because of this mindset from when I was little of like, why are you so lazy? And all those comments, and even when it wasn't said maybe out loud, I thought the message of like, you know, the teacher's like, did you try this before asking me that question? You know, all those things, of course I did. I didn't want to come up here and embarrass myself and ask for help. It's something everyone else understands. And so having that understanding, if everyone understood I was always trying my best, would have just given me so much more support. And just that mindset alone, which gave me so much for me and allowed me to communicate better, to get the things I need without having to even ask for it. And so diving into your own internalizing wisdom, what is all the truth, what are the times when you're thinking you're putting stories on other people when you haven't asked them what's actually going on. And then I normally get the question after all this explanation, what if they're actually lazy? And like, what if you go up to someone and you call them lazy, what is their response going to be? Not good. But if you go up to them and say, hey, you didn't do the same thing that you said you were going to do, what's going on? And they can say, I'm lazy, so sorry. You know, but it gives them more capacity and understanding and acceptance to allow them to explain, you know, what if you're wrong? So coming with like that little change in mindset, that's like the one thing I wish people knew about autism is always trying to that. So much for sharing this story. The next person who will be sharing is Neale. Next question. So background about Ryan. Neale is a sophomore at UCLA. He is autistic and has ADHD and anxiety.
All right.
About sharing the importance of embracing neurodivergence in the neurotypical world, especially in college. To that end, he co-founded the Grow Neurodiversity Collective, an organization merging neurodivergent student leadership with UCLA funding and support. His goal is to work with media and entertainment companies on improving neurodiversity representation in media, while hopefully working on some creative projects of his own. In his free time, he enjoys playing basketball, working out, watching movies, living in circumstances, and spending time with family.
I don't know, I was looking up at that, like I didn't write it myself. Is it Well, first off, I want to thank each and every one of you for attending, those both hybrid and in person, particularly in person. Well, Zoom has been a really incredible form of accessibility for being able to get this kind of information experiences. I do think that there is something really special about being in person and being present in the space. So thank you first off. My topic, as it said, stigmatization of autism in the media and accepting your autistic identity. And I came on that journey from, in my opinion, a very unorthodox way. I was diagnosed with autism at 18 months old, which is just about the earliest you can possibly be diagnosed. I guess I was just a really autistic baby or something. But I didn't find out about it until I was 13. More specifically, my parents didn't tell me about it until I was 13. Because now, especially then, autism was incredibly stigmatized. It wasn't the kind of thing that you could find pride in, that could be a source of community. It was a condition, it was a disease that was something to be treated or avoided. And in the first 13 years of my life, I had been in elementary, middle school, and consuming media. I had seen shows like The Big Bang Theory, watched movies like Rain Man, where autism was almost exclusively portrayed as either savant-style geniuses or emotionally repressed weirdos or losers or some combination of the two. And in my schools, I still remember autism being used by my classmates as a shorthand for different, weird, unlikable. And when I was diagnosed, I immediately was struck by this fear that somehow they'd identify me as one of the unlikables. I wanted to engage with people. I consider myself an extrovert. I love meeting people and making friends and engaging. So suddenly I'm slapped with this label that, to my best understanding, meant an inability to engage with people who I wanted to. How could I possibly assimilate that into who I am? What did I do? I didn't assimilate. I spent a lot of years avoiding autism, running away from it, trying to do everything in my power so people would know I'm autistic. I struggled to use accommodations at school, even though I absolutely deserved them, because I didn't want to do anything to highlight to teachers or students that I was different. I burned myself out socializing as much as possible and doing sports and other extracurriculars to blend in. If I had a social life, if I played sports, I can't possibly be autistic. Sheldon Cooper can't make a free throw. It was all this mechanism of trying not to be media autism, trying not to be stigmatized autism. I've been very fortunate in recent years after getting to college and really falling flat on my face in this large bureaucratic institution, that I was able to find that I had to embrace my autism if I was going to succeed, if I was going to thrive. So I began my self-advocacy journey. I published an article in Psych magazine where I talked about my experience being autistic, and I got to see autism next to my name in Google, which was a really cathartic moment to me because it meant that autism and Brian were now inherently conjoined. And I also started working on the Neurodiversity Collective, which was in the previous slide, where I'm now taking an active, forward-facing role in neurodiversity at UCLA. At age 20 now, I'm finally at the point where autism is a part of me that I'm proud of and trying to strengthen. But the problem is that took me 20 years. And I'm still a little angry to this day, thinking if the stigmatization of autism wasn't so strong in elementary and middle school, if it wasn't so incorrectly portrayed in the media, maybe I wouldn't have had to wait 10 years to be the best version of myself. And that's where I turn to the media stigmatization problem, specifically in terms of what I've researched as social role theory. Basically, the idea of social role theory is that if there are members of a group, particularly a minority group, that are overrepresented in public spaces, people begin to stereotype those specific traits onto the group as a whole. And autism is a very, very large umbrella term. There are autistic people with very high support needs that may be nonverbal, maybe unable to live on their own. And there are autistic people with low support needs that are masked autistics, that have learned to socialize in a manner that the average person might not be able to identify them. They attend college, they work jobs, they do comedy shows, they're Anthony Hopkins Oscar-winning actor. And that's a very large spectrum of experiences for one label to have. And unfortunately, what media has done is it's really honed in on a very specific segment of autism. You'd see that in shows like the recent Love on the Spectrum on Netflix, where it showcased a cast of autistic actors that were almost exclusively in the very in-between support needs segment of the spectrum. They, for the most part, had clear social differences, sometimes clear communicative challenges or delays. And even for a show marketed as on the spectrum, it didn't really show spectrum at all. It showcased a very narrow segment. And shows like these and other media representations present autism in such a narrow manner, then society naturally begins to see autism in a very narrow. So what that means is autistic people like me, who tend to be on the more lower support needs section, don't get to see ourselves represented in media. We can face discrimination, like in social role theory, where people assume I'm gonna go about the world in a way that isn't really resonant with who I am as a person. And more importantly, there are not going to be masked autistic people, especially women, who aren't going to be diagnosed with autism nearly as frequently, because society is so used to representations of particularly white, male, middle supporting autism, that the types of autistic phenotypes that don't meet those criteria aren't going to get identified. They're not going to get the supports they need. They're not going to have the opportunity to connect with autistic communities. It's a really big problem. My main prognosis or treatment for this is just better autistic representation, specifically more broad autistic representation. There needs to be media projects, movies, films that are produced by, directed by, written by, starring actually autistic actors with both low, high, and medium support needs. So that way, anyone who is autistic can see themselves identified in that source of media and can be able to tap into the autistic community that I've come to in the last few years and find it very beautiful. And we all can just, even autistics like myself, be more mindful and recognize when there's such a large umbrella to allow for the discomfort of autism meaning something very different to different people, and perhaps not even having a definition. No matter what, I can't undo the years that I lost or sacrificed being at odds with myself and my autistic identity. But with the help of more representative media, a more educated general population, and autistic people taking the lead in advocacy, we can hopefully create a world where other autistic kids don't have to wait 20 years to be the best version of themselves and be able to embrace their autistic. Thank you.
Next person will be moving on to is Markowitz. So, Dave is a 32-year-old self-advocate from Los Angeles, California. Although he was diagnosed at 12 years old, Dave's autism was largely ignored up until recently. Dave aims to spread awareness about difficulties of living with an invisible diagnosis through his own journey. He states that his life has improved significantly in the last couple of years after he began seeking proper help and support. Dave's experiences make him one of many who struggles with being neurodivergent are invisible to the world, yet very real and meaningful. With the panel being one of his earliest experiences in self-advocacy, Dave is excited to work to make a difference and help better the lives of autistic individuals with experiences much like his own. Take it away.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Before we get started, did anyone lose? We found a bunch of $20 bills with the wraparound with the rubber band. We found a rubber band. There.
I'm touching.
So what I'm going to be talking about today is basically how my autism didn't really start getting addressed properly until I was 30, which was really only just about 2 years ago. When I was about 12, I went through all the testing for autism and was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. My mom and biological dad were still married at the time. And his decision about how to move forward after that diagnosis was to completely disregard all of it and everything the doctors had suggested for me as far as treatment, where to place me in school and all that stuff. I actually don't even really remember doing any of that testing or getting that diagnosis. My mom told me way later in life that my dad back then basically said things like, my son doesn't belong there, that type of thing. He didn't want to accept that I had this disability or that something was wrong with me. So that testing I did and diagnosis was really just kind of swept under the rug. As far as functioning in middle school and high school, I did fine educationally for the most part. My grades were usually okay. had a couple of teachers in middle school that gave me a hard time when I would ask a question about something they had just gone over, like roll their eyes at me and say, I just explained that, are you not paying attention? So I basically had to learn how to fit in with everyone else, which primarily just mimic how people would act, talk, like in my own small group of friends and with my older brother and all of his friends. I started really struggling with horrible depression in high school, and my anxiety got worse and worse throughout those years. I would see many different therapists, which I realize now were not a good fit for me at all because I couldn't connect well with any of them. The biggest issue I've had throughout my life was not being able to really express my thoughts and emotions very well. I don't think the therapists and psychiatrists were really able to help me during that time, instead of, just putting me on medication for anxiety and depression, because I was really unable to give them good information for myself and what I was actually going through. I was not able to express it most of the time. With being autistic, I really struggled with articulating thoughts and actually saying them out loud the way they were thought out in my head. A lot of the time I would say something to a therapist or anyone, just family or friends, and something was wrong, and I was kind of say to myself at times, like, that's not even close to what I was really thinking in my head or what I want to express. As a person with autism, it's very difficult to organize thoughts at times, but fortunately, as I've grown and done much better treatment, just getting older as well, a lot of that has improved. I've been seeing my current therapist for a little over a year now. She has helped me out in so many ways and has improved my life in such a short amount of time. She has helped me become better at expressing my thoughts, emotions, and not just talking about surface level things in our sessions. Talking about difficult things, whether from the past or present time, is challenging, but I learned that is really necessary, and it just helps me keep moving forward in life. Learn every day how to become more positive in life as well, especially if I'm going through a difficult time. And I've learned that it takes a lot of hard work every day to be happy and live a positive life. It won't just come naturally for most people. For a little side note about me, or fun fact, I was really into skateboarding growing up and did it on a regular basis for a lot of years. I don't do it anymore, but I'm still a big fan of it. And for some time now, I've been watching different former professionals, skateboarders being interviewed on podcasts, documentaries. A lot of them have talked about how crazy their life has been from their troubled childhood, growing up poor, getting into heavy drugs, drinking, and how they've been able to become sober, completely change their lives around as they've grown older and just learned from their mistakes. Watching them speak about their lives and seeing them spreading a lot of positivity to their peers and their fans is really inspiring for me, because I can at least relate to them as far as the severe depression, anxiety goes, that sort of thing. So I'm listening to those stories, it gives me a lot of comfort to know that if they can get through their crazy lives they've had, I can definitely get through anything challenging in my own life. Now I'm more at peace with myself and accepting myself as a person with autism. I'm really looking forward to being more involved in the autism community. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful story that you gave us today. Next up, we have Talia Vail. Talia is a transfer student in their second quarter here at UCLA as an English major. They were diagnosed with ASD and ADHD at the age of 16 and have been learning as much as they can about the autism community and their identity as an autistic person. At the same time, they were also growing to know themselves as a lesbian and a member of the queer community. It's their hope that through storytelling and representation, a better understanding of autism and queerness can be spread to those who are searching for answers, particularly those who are undiagnosed and questioned. Thank you so much. And now, Talia.
So as I said, I was diagnosed, I wouldn't say necessarily super late in life, but later than I would have appreciated, at 16. And something that I noticed throughout my whole journey was when I was officially diagnosed at a time when my mental health was at an all-time low. I was in a crisis situation and I was seeking out the help of multiple therapists. The moment I saw it written on a piece of paper that I was autistic, it was like a light bulb that had been flickering for years, stuck between off and on, was finally flipped fully. Things I could never explain about myself now had an explanation, why I thought certain ways, why I spoke certain ways, felt certain ways, it all made sense finally. I felt this was a chance to discover myself anew and answer the questions that have been plaguing my mind my entire life. And all of this I told to one of my therapists, who was a part of the larger program helping me put myself back together after my mental health crumbled. And she says, "Oh, please, you're barely autistic." Sometimes I remember it as condescending. Other times I think she might have been trying to comfort me, like as if my diagnosis was a point of fear or shame. Whatever the case, those few words, unfortunately, are the ones that stick with me the most vividly out of everything that I experienced in that program. But I realized looking back that it wasn't just her. During exposure therapy, I was encouraged to put on a coat with a jacket with fur on the jacket hood, which is a lifelong sensory hatred of mine. They were confused that there was no reason and no explanation for why I hated it so much. I just did. They tried on several occasions to get me to put myself in uncomfortable sensory situations, perhaps thinking I was avoiding them out of fear or some kind of trauma response. I can't know for certain. I recall an argument I had with one therapist that completely derailed a group therapy session because I, seeking out a specific stimulation, began to chew on a piece of printer paper. For 15 minutes, she chastised me, telling me the dye in the paper would make me sick, while I held my ground, insisting I had no intention of eating it. I was talking with my parents about all of this, and one of them, my mom, said something to the effect of, "That's because they're not trained to work with autistic people." And she's absolutely right. These people are professionals in treating anxiety, depression, trauma, and various other mood disorders, but not autism. So where does that leave me and other autistic people like me? I'll be forever grateful to these people for helping me work through such a difficult time in my life, but there will always be this disconnect that taints these memories. This issue isn't isolated to this one program either. More resources are being provided every day for people struggling with mental health, but as soon as autism is added to the mix, many of these professionals are left fumbling in the dark, and their patients are the ones who pay for it. Autism is treated as such an other in the world of psychology that finding someone who understands how autism affects other conditions is like finding a needle in an incredibly expensive haystack. Autistic patients cannot be approached as if their autism doesn't exist or as just another problem to be solved. Our autism doesn't exist in a vacuum separate from all other areas of life. We are people. We are whole people. Our experiences cannot be separated. Autism acceptance is necessary for everyone, but especially for those who claim to be experts in psychology. And a lot of times that falls flat. We deserve to be understood by the ones who are meant to hold knowledge and help us. We deserve to feel seen as an entire being and not just as fractured fragments of different diagnoses, even those of us who are barely autistic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Talia, for your speech. Next up, we have our final panelist, Wonder non-curated. Wonder is a non-binary disability advocate specializing in autism, chronic illness, and the deaf community. They are a signed model actor, and dancer for Disney Talent Base in Los Angeles, California. Wonder also works as a full-time content creator on Instagram and TikTok, mainly focusing on disability rights and advocacy. Wonder makes their content accessible for all by captioning and writing detailed image descriptions for all of their content. As an autistic person, Wonder pays great attention to detail. Wonder is not speaking and communicates in American Sign Language and within AAC device. Wonder loves to advocate for access to language and spread representation of authentic American Sign Language as a deaf applicant. As an autistic advocate, Wonder is working to spread the message of the free meaning of autism applicants. So today we have two interpreters for Wonder. We have here Daniel Mateo and Markowitz. I'll be letting all the language that would please do pay attention to what they have to say and interpret from them.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wander, and today I'd like to be discussing true meaning of autism acceptance. Autism acceptance was started by Paula Durbin-Wetsby in 2011. She began the public shift from autism awareness to autism acceptance after Autism Speaks used the term to demonstrate autism and autism people and fear-monger parents of autistic children, making several horrific and untrue claims, including that autism is more deadly than cancer and will ruin your marriage, just to name a few. These statements are extremely harmful and resulted in the general public fearing autism and autistic people instead of accepting and supporting us as human beings. Autism awareness research and funding and these statements are extremely fruitful and resulted in the general public hearing autism instead of accepting. Autism awareness research and funding was and still is mainly focused on preventing and finding a cure. In other words, the eradication of autistic people instead of researching and funding how to support the autism population. These harmful views towards autistic people have resulted in autistics being encouraged and forced to attempt to become less autistic and mask their autism in order to be accepted by society. It has resulted in our success being defined as
What, sorry?
indistinguishable from our
What?
peers.
Is there capable of moving like caretaker requirements?
Acceptance focuses on
So there's,
autistic people as people and not
because the
as
thing is, it thinks you're like, in order to qualify for
mental problems or
social,
something that
you're
needs to be
autistic, no matter how much autism, like no matter what degree you're on, you need a caretaker in order to sign off on whatever you need. But if you're like, I'm only autistic in like social situations, you don't want to have to get a caretaker for everything. Impossible to get a caretaker.
autism acceptance is encouraging access, accommodation, and advocacy for autistic people. Not only accepting, but appreciating us exactly as we are. I want to live in a world where it is safe for an autistic person to stop masking. We are not broken. We are not a mystery. We are not puzzles. Autism is not a mystery. We have so many autistic advocates sharing our experiences, how we think and how we interact with the world. We need to be listened to as many autistic voices as we can, because each and every one of us has something unique to share. Our symbol is the rainbow infinity sign. It represents that the autism spectrum is not a line. It is infinite possibilities because each autistic person is different. The common public understanding of what ASD is made up of stereotypes that originally came from the 1988 reign. Because of this, most Hollywood portrayals since has displayed autism as most only white middle-aged savant men. This is not an individually unique. We can't possibly represent the autism community as a whole with just one group. In order to achieve universal autism acceptance, we need to be sharing representation of real autistic people by autistic people. Have a conversation with us. For this to happen, it needs to be safe. It needs to be safe to not mask in public settings. And we need accommodations available to us to access everyday life. The world needs autistic people, and autism makes the world more unique. We need diversity in neurotype and perspective. Accepting autism means accepting autistic people. Acceptance would mean no more needing to hide. More of us could stop masking and be ourselves. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for this. That was amazing. Next up, we are going to be moving into our Q&A session.
Q&A session. Just go ahead.
So we had a code up for basically all of our speakers. If any of you are not comfortable to ask the questions out loud, we do recommend you to scan the code again. People back in 5 minutes have that code up for them. But if there are any audience members out there that would like to ask specific questions to any of the speakers, please raise your hand. We'll want to.
First of all, I'd like to thank you all so very much for sharing this part of your lives. It was really touching and educational for me personally. Do you know if there has been a change in elementary school and middle schools currently? Is the environment more accepting? Is it better at teaching and complementing children who have been diagnosed with autism? I had a feeling you might not know, but I guess I'm hoping that things have changed.
First off, feel free to jump in if you guys have anything to add. I haven't been in elementary school in 9 years, so I'm a little rusty, but my brother's in elementary school, so know a little bit. I think the capacity of small children to bully, belittle, or make fun of others based on differences is something that unfortunately likely will never change, because it's quite frankly something that is human. I think what is changing a little bit is people are becoming more and more aware of what autism looks like in different contexts. I think previously, either you were so autistic that you were sent to special education, so you weren't engaging with the average student, or you wouldn't get diagnosed because you didn't seem like a special needs student. And I think today, because there's been work by scientists to understand more variants in autism, and teachers are being more understanding, and the education is slowly starting to creep up. There are more autistic kids, openly autistic kids in general education classes. And I think as a result, it is a little bit better because kids now know what autism looks like. They're having their autistic siblings, they may have autistic parents. And it's honestly a lot of the bullying, and from my experience, is people using autism as an insult to non-openly autistic kids. When they are openly autistic, I found that people are actually a little more kinder and a little more accommodating. So hopefully just the greater exposure of people to autism and autistic individuals, not just through TV and movies, it's making it slightly better, even if the progress is a little slow. That answers it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that has a question that you would ask to follow up?
Hi, thanks for sharing your stories. So for the panelists, it seems like diagnosis is a very common theme that was really the catalyst for, changing your life, or I'm not speaking to Doc here. But how do you view diagnosis in terms of how that helped you kind of, so every person has a narrative plot to their life, right? They were born, they went to elementary school, yada, yada. Was diagnosis something very important for you to kind of say, okay, so here I was before diagnosis and here I was after diagnosis? Or is it kind of something that just it is what it is? I'm not sure if that makes sense.
I would say it kind of does, like it is a bit of an individual experience, but I know for me, it was not necessarily like oh, here I am post-diagnosis, here I am pre-diagnosis. It was more along the lines of, because I was diagnosed when I was kind of after I've been self-aware for a while. I looked back at myself before the diagnosis and realized that's because of autism, that's because of autism, that's because of autism. And as a very kind of introspective person, I had all these questions and I noticed all these things that I did and had no explanation for it. And I knew that they were reasons that I had difficulty connecting with my peers and just feeling different. And I never had a reason for it. It was just like, well, I guess you're just weird or some. So when you get that diagnosis, you realize like, oh, there are a lot of other people like me. There are reasons for this. It isn't just because I'm weird or I'm a freak, or it's because like I have this reason, and there's a whole community of people who have similar experiences, and it just helps me kind of understand myself in a way that I couldn't for a very long time. Is there anybody else?
So I would not know I'm autistic, and except for the fact that my twin sister did it and was looking for herself, and then we actually this fits Chloe to a T. So I got diagnosed purely for my legal rights. Nothing changed in my life. I was already on the path of finding support. With this diagnosis, like just Chloe needs help with things, and my family always looked at like what works and not like what they should be doing. My grandma was a preschool teacher and always taught to the individual students. So my family never looked into like, oh, this runs into our family felt after my twin sister. Just got really into looking into that stuff when I'm autistic and told everyone no one will meet her. And then she was like, oh, you need to, so convince their parents to look into it, and we got a diagnosis at 16. So that's how, so the diagnosis to me didn't change anything, but I did find out after getting it that I had all these legal rights to support, to, accommodations at school. and all these things, like, I wouldn't have known without a diagnosis. So I just look at it as it gives you those rights, which it sucks that it could be so expensive for some people to get that. But, and yeah, that's how it's.
So for me, I got diagnosed when I was 12, but I didn't even know that that happened. I don't remember any of the testing at all, really. And, so all of it was kind of just ignored, and then I even got diagnosed again, I think. When, when I was maybe 26 by a therapist, or said, oh, maybe he could be this, maybe he does have, or whatever. So really then, I've been doing a blood test recently, getting on results for just an updated diagnosis, so I think that'll help me out a lot even more than, the help I have been getting the last couple of years. Yeah, so excited to see what happens with that.
I will mention, I also did get, re-diagnosed at 19, in a time when it was a huge crisis. Because I wanted to make sure, and I remember that, because it was kind of during COVID, I remember during that Zoom call, reading off the diagnosis, she's going down the list, and she goes, autism spectrum disorder, and I go, yes! Because I was so afraid that if they weren't gonna find it and I was gonna lose all of those answers, but I was thrilled, like I was so excited.
I'll try to be quick because we've had people share it, and if I don't censor myself, I will talk for years. I just kind of want to shed light on we talk about diagnosis and legal rights, where in a lot of places, especially academic institutions, if you don't get a diagnosis, you're not legally entitled to accommodations. I go to UCLA, I'm a UCLA student. Getting a UCLA degree is important for me, so when I go to advocacy work as an adult, I'll have this degree to help back up what I say. But if I wasn't diagnosed, I wouldn't be entitled to accommodations. If I wasn't entitled to accommodations, I may not be able to graduate, or if I did, I'd do it with a very poor GPA. So accommodations or that diagnosis is very important in that specific area. However, there's some people that only really accept diagnosed autistics in the autism community, and I think that to be very misguided. It's like a lot of people, it's like, oh, everyone's self-diagnosing on TikTok. Like, first of all, autism isn't yet at a point where it's something that people would want to be. It's not cool yet. I would love it if people would be like, oh my God, I'm autistic, I'm so trendy. That would be amazing. But we're not there yet. And the reality is the diagnosis for autism and many other neurodivergent conditions is incredibly expensive. It costs upwards of $5,000 for a lot of folks. And there's a huge waiting periods. Diagnosis simply isn't accessible. And if you're low income, if you're marginalized communities, that's $5,000 is rent, it's food, it's not always accessible. So I think diagnosis is important. It was important for me to be able to
Sometimes I'm not sure if he actually.
come into my own as an autistic person and to kind of have that validation. But
Here,
I don't think it should be considered
an in-person panel.
the end all be all. If you learn about autism or any neurodivergent condition, and you check in with yourself and you feel like you align with it, and go ahead, call yourself autistic, join autistic communities, autistic spaces. Worst comes to worst, you rethink it and discover, oh, maybe I'm not autistic. It's fine. I'm not gonna
Demystifying, destigmatizing. So good turn out there?
I can't tell. There's a few people on Zoom.
Has he put on many panels?
This is his second time on this.
He's kind of either on them or
He's been
moderating.
a few.
The best way sometimes is watch how others do it and see some really good ones. So
Broken life, not a broken person.
this is painful to follow.
Okay.
It's like other people, in their lives,
diagnosed, but now it's easy, to have errors and in need of help. And you may struggle with yourself, and it's not enough. However, I'm not wrong.
However, there's nothing wrong with you. That's what I really the diagnosis. I try to do everything I can to teach myself, allowing myself not to remain in that negative mindset. There's the same as others, but it's still, my mind support, my needs, and moving forward, figuring that out for myself, and how I work with that, how I can be able to thrive in those situations. It's never like easy. I never really thought my word is to now just understand it.
And we also have a question from Zoom, the virtual meeting that we have open right now. Question from Anna. I would like to know how you feel when you have a meltdown or feeling anxious. I want to know as a mom to a special needs boy who is nonverbal when my son has behaviors aggressive or overwhelming. How can I help him?
I would say, for me personally, although it is a rare occasion, just having things that, like, allowing them to have things close by that help them feel comfortable being in a space that makes them feel comfortable, like, that makes me feel a lot better. Usually it's kind of, I tend to detach a lot when I have a meltdown, like, kind of outside of my own head or too deep into it. And I just need to kind of be in that space for a while until I'm able to process things again. I think, like, the kind of pushing to like asking what's wrong over and over again, kind of like pushing for an explanation. It doesn't really help because there's not much capacity to explain in that moment. And it kind of aggravates it because now you're thinking more onto, oh, I'm very upset. I'm in a situation that makes me very upset. And so now you're being told to explain like what's upsetting you, and now you're being upset more. So just kind of like giving them the space that they need to calm down, giving them access to the coping mechanisms that they need, whether that be like something that makes them happy, maybe a YouTube video, maybe a toy of some kind, something that tends to help me in those situations. But giving them that time before going into like panic mode, explanation mode is important, because once the meltdown is over, then if they can explain it, they will. Yes, yeah. Let the process happen and then deal with the explanation.
And this is a question I get from my parent clients, and if you were client, I'd ask for specifics, but, with like meltdowns, with heightened emotions, I always say address emotion first, problem second. Because even if you do have someone who can't explain what's going on, normally it's incorrect, it's wrong in that moment. And they're gonna project on something they want you to fix, and it'll be the wrong thing. Starting with doing something to calm down the emotion, or just validating that it's okay to feel the emotion. I have like a clear memory of like one of the first times where I was met with like acceptance during meltdown. I was like 12 or something, and I had, there was a lot going on at home, and I was like hiding some of my problems from my parents because my twin sister is on home hospital care, and I was like, this is like nothing compared to the issues with like she might live or die, kind of thing. And so I had to fail the test and to get like the parent signature, but I didn't want to show it to her. And she found it, and she said, what happened? You studied really hard, I know you did. And I just started crying, and she started crying, and we said nothing, and she said, would you like to switch schools? Because I don't think it's you that's the issue. And like that, I like was able to like get through that feeling of like, this is never gonna end kind of thing. And it just let me just pass through that emotion because she like said it was okay to feel what I'm feeling and that she was feeling it too. And so I think a lot of parents are afraid to like get vulnerable in these moments and admit they don't have the answers or like, you know, that they're upset too and like hide it and try to fix it. And a lot of times what that felt like was, it's not a big deal. It's happening because we can just fix it. And when she was like, yes, this is a big deal, I'm feeling it too, we could just like get through that together. And I felt better on the other side. Like we didn't have an answer, but we didn't need one. I just need someone to say like, this is hard. What you're feeling is big, you know, those sort of things. You don't need specific. There's no like, oh, this is the thing that will work for that. It's just validating what's happening and allowing it to happen and like not going into like being afraid of what's going to happen next or like problem solving. Like similar to what you said, like kind of rephrasing it. But that, yeah, I would say allowing a meltdown to happen helps the meltdown to de-escalate in a safe way.
Hey, so, I heard what you mentioned, that after getting a diagnosis, you were thinking, oh, it makes sense why I was like this, oh, that's my autism, this thing, that thing. So I was curious to, ask about some of the things that, you all have noticed about yourself that sets you apart from, I guess most people, especially in terms of the way that most people think. For example, one thing I've noticed about myself is that I get really uncomfortable when people avoid saying how they really, either saying the truth or saying how they really feel about a situation, whether it's out of self-preservation for themselves or trying to preserve the relationships with the people in the room, or whether just wanting to sound nice. I've noticed in those instances, I'm usually the only person in the room that would rather just say the truth of the situation or how I feel rather than to do that. So I was interested to ask you all about certain things about yourself that you notice set you apart.
I guess I'll start because I was the one who said that. I would say, I mean, it kind of ranges from like big things to little things. So like big things, I know that there are just certain things that I don't necessarily understand in I guess like the way that people interact with each other. Like I know, especially in like dating scenes of people who say like, oh yeah, let's go do this thing. And then they get confused when the other person is like excited to go do this thing or like, why are they still interested? Or when they tell I wasn't interested. It's like, well, why did you say that then? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. These kinds of double, like not saying what you don't mean and then expecting them to get it. There's, then there's kind of little things, like, I hate, like, the sound of, like, kind of sensory experiences are the big one, I think. Cause like the sound of certain sounds, certain touches, it just makes it very difficult sometimes. Like I know I mentioned the fur on jacket, but that texture of anything, I can't touch it. I won't, if you're wearing a jacket with that, I will not touch you. I will cringe away from you. Do not get close to me with that. And that has caused some problems. Like I remember my cousin was wearing a jacket like that and went in for a hug and I backed away from her and I had to explain, like, you have to take that jacket off before you touch me. Some things, like some sounds are incredibly painful almost. I remember there was like a pan moved on the stove and made a squeaking sound so horrendous that I was like incapacitated for 2 minutes. And I had a therapist explain to me that sometimes these sensory experiences are like, you have a physical reaction. Like it's genuinely physically painful. Like it would have hurt less if someone stabbed me in the eardrum. And I think like that is probably the biggest thing that I noticed is just how these sensory experiences affect my everyday life. Because I genuinely, like, I will avoid certain sensory experiences because it is so uncomfortable, but I will also seek them out. Not the ones that I don't like, but other ones that I do like. Because it feels so good. Like, I love driving because my car feels like a giant sim machine. It's great. I love it. So it's just kind of like these very intense experiences that I think that I never really noticed people didn't feel until I had that diagnosis and I was like, oh, that's autism.
Something that like blows my mind is I have to consciously think about almost everything I do. Like I have to think about holding this mic or like I have to think about I have to think through like when I'm grabbing something where my placement is and like and if someone's trying to talk to me while I'm doing something, I drop things all the time. But like everything I do takes so much effort and thought, and that took a long time for me to figure out. Other people don't think about things when they're like, yeah, the memory of something like drawing. When you're writing letters, I'm thinking about drawing each of the little letters, and people are just writing without thinking about it, and that's why they can take notes in class and I can't. And I'm just like, if you have that much space in your brain, what are you doing with it? Nothing. So you're not thinking about anything while doing that. That blows my mind. There's so much space we have, and I'm just thinking about holding this microphone. Like if I didn't have to think about that, yeah, life would be easier. And like, yeah, so there's just times where I'm thinking about like these things, and I'm like, oh, if people don't have to think about that, what are they gonna do? So that's something that it keeps popping up in my head because I watch people do things. Wow. But I ask them how they did it, they don't know. So, that's now gonna be a thought you have all this.
I'll go. I think, well, first off, like, we are just 5 autistic individuals, so just because our experiences may not align with yours or anyone else's doesn't necessarily mean you're not autistic or just because you relate doesn't mean you are. Just to get off the bat. I think kind of to echo a lot of what you guys said, it's a lot of it, especially socially, revolves around conscious effort on behaviors and tasks that might be automatic to others. Like, have you ever had that time like when you're like going to sleep and you like are conscious that you're swallowing your saliva, so then you're just thinking about it and it becomes a mechanism.
No.
Oops. Or like breathing. It's almost like most of us breathe unconsciously throughout the day. If we're taking a breath every 5 to 10 seconds, that's hundreds or even thousands of breaths a day. We don't think about those. But imagine there was just another segment of humans who every single breath they took was manual. And as they're going about the day, as they're walking, as they're talking, if they're in lecture, like every 5 seconds, they have to consciously take a breath. Doesn't that sound like just so annoying? It's like if you had to think to breathe every time. That's kind of the way I see autism as it comes to the way I socialize and move through the world. Like if I recognize someone and like walk into class, I'm like, okay, raise my eyebrows, people look surprised, and I'm like, oh my God, no way, it's good to see you. And it's like I have to prep that. It's almost like a machine learning algorithm. Or making sure I'm making eye contact. Like if I'm in a discussion section and I'm talking to people, I'm making sure my eyes are going to every single person to make sure everyone feels like they're part of the conversation. And that's something that takes conscious effort. And things like this just add up and make for socializing to be pretty exhausting, because if I don't do those things, if I'm not reflecting, if I'm not making eye contact and masking, then it means that people may perceive me as different. And people perceive me as different, and that often leads to microaggressions or outright discrimination. So it's kind of, it means I really have to be performing when I'm out in public, otherwise it's risky to do so. And this idea of the world being a threat is something that I found to be a commonality for a lot of autistic people. So, and also sunscreen. Terrible. Just let me go. Kidding.
I don't know, for me, in like social situations, this has always been a big thing. I was kind of being way too quiet or not talking enough or not at all, but I kind of just accepted that. I get overwhelmed pretty easily, and like when I'm even with close friends meeting their, different people, a lot of them that I've met are pretty extroverted, and for me, it's I get overwhelmed pretty easily where I lose energy. I have to not talk, just kind of listen or just hang out, whatever. So learn to kind of just give myself a break and so that it's okay. I don't have to be like people I'm around to be super extroverted or whatever. See what I'm comfortable with. Talk when I want to talk. Yes.
Let's go back real quick. I realize, is this on? Yeah. I realize that a lot of us talked about primarily the negative ways that autism impacts, or the ways that autism impacts our lives in a way that is challenging in society. And so I just want to bring to voice just a couple positives. I feel like I'm really good at recognizing patterns in people, places, and things. I've made money in all my fantasy football leagues because I always know which players to pick up off the waiver wire. I know who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, what teams are going to trend. And honestly, I think my pattern recognition helps me in a lot of social situations because I've been able to learn from the ground up how people socialize and interact and make a recreation of that in my brain. I feel like also, because the social norms and behaviors aren't like I haven't internalized them the same way, I feel like I'm a lot more open-minded to different people and experiences. Like I don't know, I don't really just understand like sexism, racism, or homophobia. I just don't get it conceptually. Like I don't need to go into detail explaining that because A, it should be evident, and B, that's not the purpose of the panel. But I feel like my autism has made me a much more open-minded person. I look at a lot of American goals being so stringent and closed-minded about certain dogmas that make no sense. I'm like, how do you think like this? How do you treat people like this? And it's just astounding to me.
I want to build off of that a little bit, and kind of touch on, kind of experiencing autism while being a queer person as well. Because I feel like being autistic and exploring your identity as a queer person, it opens a lot of doors because you don't, like, there are so many different perspectives that you consider without being stuck in the traditional roles that society kind of places you in those boxes. Because one thing I love about the way that I think about things is that I'm always like, there's a lot of what ifs. I know I've been told, like, at 2 years old, I started asking why, and then I never stopped. And I think that's part of the fun is like, asking why is it like that? Questioning why it has to be like that, and then experimenting with what could be. And that helped a lot with being able to explore like my sexuality, my gender, how I express myself, how I feel in my own identity. And getting to kind of experience that, it's freeing because you don't feel like you're so tied down to everything in the same way. Being autistic, like, you're already kind of labeled as other. So once you're already in that label, you can go crazy, essentially. You don't have to, like, there's so much, the world is your oyster and you can explore it however you want. And there are so many possibilities that I think people just kind of don't even think about because they're stuck in that binary, in that one space. And I think like that's kind of part of the good is just being able to explore outside of what is expected, the typical.
I agree with this. Oh, I actually agree with what Talia said, what you're saying, talking about, how do you make changes, and questioning things, asking why, understanding, also understanding the reason behind it. And that's really something that's pretty good about, that I really about myself. For example, one good thing is that sometimes when people behave a certain way, or when people try to be friendly, behave and try to be less friendly than when they behave with other people, won't really feel offended by that. I've noticed that these people tend to focus on how to make other people. Before that, I'm focused on why is the person doing what they're doing. Someone's that isn't being nice to me. I don't look at them and I don't judge them because they're not being nice to me. So I always try to understand why are they behaving that way. And at times it really feels sad, because why are you doing it? And it's something I understand. And again, I never felt offended, and I'm very thankful for that experience.
So in interest of time, we are gonna go and just kind of move towards more of like, getting refreshments and giving you all the opportunity to speak individually with the speakers. So we do have some gifts for our speakers just to honor them for their time and for coming here. So we will be handing those out individually.
But before we do that, I'll just let you know where each speaker will be stationed. So if you want to go up to a specific person and ask a specific question, you can go ahead and do that. So Wonder will be in this corner, kind of near the table over here. And Chloe will be kind of in that nook back over there, and she will be right over there. Brian's gonna be in that nook over there, kind of in that area. And then Jake's gonna be towards the back of those chairs over here, and then Talia's gonna be towards the front of the chairs over here. So if you have any specific question, or if there are questions that we weren't able to answer, first of all, so sorry about that, but please feel free to go and ask the questions to the speakers in person. And yeah, so without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and just give a gift back to each of our speakers. We'll just go in order of this way. So we'll start with Ryan first. So Sophie, you can come up and give the gift back to Ryan. So basically, just for a little bit of context, each of these bags just had like a few little stickers, like, a sticker that's like a rainbow infinity sign, just for like, the sign that is representing the autistic community. There's also a different sticker that just says, says celebrate autistic minds. And then we also just have some like STEM toys, some fidget toys. We have like some like spiky balls or like, like a zipper bracelet. And then the most fun thing I think we have is just a weighted stuffed animal that we got a specific animal for each specific speaker based on what we found they liked. So each person has their own unique animal, and just a weighted stuffed animal that we have found or have been told has helped a lot with autistic people. So every single person gets that. If you want to show it, go ahead. So Ryan got a dragon. Yeah. Okay, and then we will go ahead and do Jake. Do you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right. And then we'll go ahead and do Jake next. So Sophie will be doing that as well. Yes. Picture on, gotta have a picture on. Okay, perfect. And then so for Jake, we got you a box. And it was a really cute box. So we're just it was like connected by word. Amazing. Beautiful. Okay. Beautiful. And then for Chloe, we will have Jason give the bag. Stay on. So for Chloe, in honor of your service dog, we got you a dog stuffed animal. But yeah. Yes, okay, we'll go on to Talia next. Talia, we couldn't find you a frog. I'm so sorry. For those of you who don't know, Talia is actually a member of Autism Advocacy. And they were so nice to offer to be a speaker for us. And so we were really trying to find a spot for her. Unfortunately, the next best thing was an axolotl. It's a really cute little pink axolotl. We thought it was adorable. So that is a big And last but not least, we have Wonder. Wonder, we got you a bear because we saw some TikTok about crocheting bears. And so we thought that you might like that. So we got you a bear stuffed animal. So we hope you like it. So yeah, we also, at this point, you guys can feel free to get food. Just one quick note, just for anyone who is vegetarian, please, there are vegetarian maps available for you. Just please get those so that people who are vegetarian can get vegetarian food, and then after that, everyone else can get it as well. But yeah, this is just the time for you all to just kind of network, socialize a little bit, and we'll have our speakers stationed in the specific spot that we're going to station. But just as a closing thought, thank you all so much for coming. This is our first time ever doing an in-person speaker panel. So it's been a wild ride trying to organize it and figure it out and make it happen. But we are hoping that in future years we get to make it bigger. We're making it bigger and better. And I wanted to specifically thank our speaker panel initiative team. If those of you who are here could just stand up really quickly. So yes, all of you stand up. For these past almost like over 3 months of finding speakers, helping us ask questions, organize, finding our interpreters who have been here today. Thank you all so much for being here. Just so much work has gone into this event. We want to just thank everybody who was involved. So good job, you guys.
And lastly, thank you to both of our interpreters. We are so grateful that you were able to be here today and help us to bring wonder to our panel as well. So thank you all so much for everyone who helped make this happen. And yeah, I think that is about it. Thank you all. Feel free to get some food and feel free to talk for us.